I am Solomia Vibitska, and in a United Marathon, this is the TCH summary broadcast. The number of people injured as a result of Russian strikes on Kharkiv has risen to 17. For the second time in 2 days, more criminals are attacking the city with guided aerial bombs. This time, they hit a medical facility in the industrial district. Among the injured is a 12-year-old girl. 2 people were killed and 14 wounded in Konstantinivka, Donetsk region. The Russians dropped 4 aerial bombs on the city and shelled it with artillery. The explosions destroyed at least 10 apartment buildings and more than 20 private homes. 3 more people were injured in Marnarad. At dawn, the Russians shelled the Dnipro district of Kherson with a drone. 4 city residents were wounded. Another drone attacked a utility worker's vehicle. 1 worker was killed, and 2 of his colleagues were seriously injured. The enemy fired artillery at residential areas in Snyhursk and the village of Veselyanka in Zaporizhia. A man and a woman were injured. In the morning, the occupiers struck the city center of Sumy. An administrative building was damaged, and in the Znadnovohursky community, a Russian drone dropped explosives on a car. A woman was killed. All day long, the Nikopol district in Dnipropetrovsk region was under attack from artillery and drones. Private houses, a municipal enterprise, and cars were damaged. Now, let's talk in more detail about Kharkiv. There are already 17 people injured from the strike of a guided aerial bomb on a medical facility there, including a 12-year-old girl. Since this morning, a TSN film crew has been working at the site of the strike, so we'll get more details about the aftermath live from our correspondent Yulia Boyko. Yulia, hello. So first of all, tell us what condition the injured people are in and how extensive is the destruction in the city after this attack?
Solomia, it wasn't just the morning that was explosive for us, but the evening as well, because just a few minutes before we went live, the Russians attacked the city with a Chernica-type UAV. It exploded in the Kievsky district. According to Kharkiv Mayor Igor Terekov, an apartment building was damaged. There is also a medical facility near the impact site. At the moment, information about casualties is being clarified. All specialized teams are working at the scene. And now let's talk about the morning shelling. This is already the second time in 2 days that the Russians have attacked Kharkiv with guided aerial bombs. This time, they struck directly at a medical facility. There are also private homes nearby, which were also partially damaged. The enemy attacked precisely at a time when there were already quite a lot of people on the streets.
I heard this really loud, really strong whistling sound. I didn't even have time to understand what it was or where it came from. And I was just lifted up. It hit me so terribly that I thought I had gone deaf for. Well, basically, I didn't really have time to think about anything, but I was just tossed up and turned upside down like a little bug. I guess they were aiming for the hospital after all. But since we're nearby...
My wife was at home. I was at work. She called me. I came over. Well, I arrived and saw that all the windows on the veranda were blown out, and the windows in the living rooms were shattered too.
An enemy shell hit the dispensary building directly. At the time of the attack, there were medical staff and patients inside. For several hours, it was unknown whether there were people trapped under the rubble. It wasn't until the rescuers heard a ringing sound from under the ruins, like a phone ringing. But fortunately, no one was found under the collapsed structures.
According to preliminary information, there were patients, 13 people, and just as many medical staff. This is an entirely civilian facility. There are residential buildings nearby. There is no military infrastructure or military facilities here.
At this moment, it is known that 17 people have been injured. Among them is a 12-year-old girl. She is experiencing an acute stress reaction. Another woman was also hospitalized. She is an employee of the medical facility. Doctors assess her condition as mild. And this is already the second airstrike on the city using aerial bombs. The day before, the Russians hit apartment buildings in the Shevchenkivsky district. More than 40 people were injured there. 3 of them are still in the hospital.
That's 2 women and 1 man. Their condition is of moderate severity and stable. They are in the surgical and trauma departments. At the moment, they are receiving all necessary medical care, dressings, and they are under observation.
As before, the Russians attacked with new weaponry. This time it was with a guided aerial bomb, the OMPB-5. It has a warhead weighing 250 kilograms and an improved planning and correction module. This allows the Russians to strike from a distance of over 100 kilometers. Previously, such munitions were launched from 80 kilometers away. And now, the rescue workers have already completed the emergency rescue operation at the site. Utility workers have been working here since early morning, and people personally came up to us and asked us to pass on a big thank you to the utility workers, rescuers, and paramedics who arrived literally just a few minutes after the explosion. That's all.
Thank you, Yulia, for the details. By the way, we absolutely join in expressing our gratitude to the rescuers and medical workers. TSN correspondent Yulia Boyko was live with us just now from Kharkiv. She told us about yet another strike on the city and about how the residents are recovering and how everything is working in a coordinated way there, especially the utility workers, rescuers, and medical staff. In Odessa, specialists have to decide the fate of the damaged entrance and the entire building that was hit by a Russian drone. The strike on the 9-story residential building happened on the night before Thursday. 4 people were injured. They suffered blast injuries and shrapnel wounds. Later, rescuers found the body of a deceased 32-year-old man under the rubble. The destruction of the panel structures in the building is critical, and the entrance could collapse at any moment. In addition, as a result of the attack, numerous architectural landmarks in downtown Odessa were damaged or destroyed, including the Vorontsov Palace, 2 hotels, the Fruit Arcade at the Privaz Market, the Palace on Primorsky Boulevard, and several other historic buildings within the UNESCO protection zone. The Russians attacked Mala Tokmachka, which is located southeast of Orkiv, with a mechanized column. And this is the first time in quite a while that the enemy has dared to launch a mechanized assault in this area, and in broad daylight at that. Ukrainian intelligence detected the enemy's movement in time, and then the crews of strike drones and artillery units of the 118th Mechanized Brigade went to work on the enemy's armored vehicles. The self-propelled artillerymen showed and told the TSN film crew what the not-so-young but very accurate M109L self-propelled howitzer is capable of. During the report, there will be a QR code on your screens, so please pay attention to it. This is a fundraiser for drones, which are in very short supply at the front. Join in.
Actually, these days, they're not exactly racing across the steppes of Zaporizhia. These are the self-propelled artillerymen of Ukraine's 118th Separate Mechanized Brigade.
We don't drive around anymore. We don't go anywhere. Because, the sky is swarming. Whoa. Fifi, that's where the guys are.
Muscovite drones, both reconnaissance and strike, circle in the sky over the Orkiv-Tokmak section of the front, lining up their targets and attacking around the clock, striking as soon as they spot any movement on the Ukrainian side.
Fifi, we rolled out, fired, and just as we rolled back in, a shell landed right, basically straight into the upper dugout.
That's why the artillerymen of the 118th mostly have to work from covered, well-camouflaged positions.
They relay the coordinates. We drive out as quickly as possible, fire, and then pull back. Right now, we're mostly targeting infantry.
Infantry?
Yeah.
So, there's infantry movement?
Well, there are 2 or 3 guys. They're moving around, and we target them.
Usually, says Varka, the gunner of the 155mm self-propelled howitzer M109, just a few shells are enough for them to silence another group of Russian infantry for good.
2 or 3 shells. We can see that they're short on manpower. In order to locate our anti-tank missile system, they might even send, let's say, 10 occupiers to their deaths.
Such attempts by the Russians to infiltrate with infantry from the southeast towards Mala Tokmachka happen every day. For his crew, the grandson admits, as the commander of the M109 self-propelled gun, all of them are just numbers, target coordinates.
We mostly deal with numbers, but they regularly send us videos so we understand what we're firing at. The boy's father. It even, how to say, boosts morale, so to speak, especially if we did a good job.
We fired at their self-propelled gun, and then things started coming our way. Yeah.
Same here. Basically, we destroyed their self-propelled gun, and they tried to get us, but they didn't succeed.
Lately, such artillery duels have become rare, say the self-propelled artillerymen of the 118th. The occupiers don't bring their howitzers close to the front line because for many kilometers along the line of contact, everything is monitored and destroyed by Ukrainian drones. Instead, there was a period in the Orikhiv area when, as counter-battery measures, the Russians used aviation.
They would precisely detect the exact locations where artillery was actively firing from, and then subsequently launch their devastating KABs directly at that specific area. Usually, a significant volley of 10, 12, or sometimes even 15 KABs would come in simultaneously at once.
The day before, from the southeast flank, the Russians tried once again to attack the 118th's defensive line near Orikhiv, this time with the support of a tank for infantry fighting vehicles, and more than half a dozen fast buggies.
The enemy realized that they don't have the strength to capture the city, let's say, to storm it head-on. To take a city, you need not only manpower, but also a large amount of equipment.
MHM.
Right now, the 118th Separate Mechanized Brigade has been stationed here for more than 2 full years already, and we are actively knocking out their military equipment along a pretty wide and extensive line of combat engagement. Break time equals 0.5s/.
MHM. Ukrainian scouts detected the enemy assault column even as it was approaching the line where it would deploy into battle formation. Our defenders destroyed the tank, 3 BMPs, and 4 buggies with precise drone strikes and artillery fire. Muscovites ended their senseless existence on the approaches to Molotov-Machka. The enemy assault collapsed before it even began. Reporting from the southern section of the front in Zaporizhia, Alexander Motorny, Alexander Shayan, and Vitaly Ovsyannikov, TSN, 1+1, United News Marathon.
A prisoner exchange for 1,200 people. That is the only concrete result from the negotiations with the delegation of the aggressor country in Turkey. There, they agreed on a new round of exchanges. The negotiations took place on Wednesday evening in Istanbul. Ukraine proposed to hold a high-level meeting between President Zelensky and Putin with the presence of the American and Turkish presidents. Only such a level is capable of achieving concrete progress, say the participants of the negotiations. Before Istanbul, the Ukrainian delegation visited Ankara, where they met with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. He promises to make efforts to hold talks with Putin and Trump and to find out whether he can bring them to Istanbul. And so far, the results of the negotiations between Ukraine and Russia, the first round of which took place in mid-May and the second at the beginning of June, have mostly been prisoner exchanges and the transfer of the bodies of the deceased. And now, let's talk about the protest mood sparked by the law numbered 12414. Thousands of posts on social media and, it seems, even more banners on the streets all across Ukraine. How Ukrainians reminded the authorities that they know how to stand up for their rights. TSN correspondent Alina Hushtik will tell us more.
Veto the law. Veto the law. Veto the law.
A law that, for the first time in 3.5 years of full-scale war, has sparked such a wave of outrage. Headlines in global media, social networks, city streets.
No to corruption in the government.
It's the 4th day, and the slogan no. 12414 still hasn't disappeared from the streets of Ukraine.
12414. To hell with it.
Tuesday. Parliament. On the agenda is a draft amendment to the Criminal Procedure Code regarding missing persons. And suddenly, amendments concerning the powers of NABU and SAP appear there.
The 10th Amendment, in the version that was rejected by the committee. Please vote.
Most deputies vote in favor. Within a few hours, the news spreads through Ukrainians' posts. Veterans call for a protest.
We need to go out today and demand that Zelensky not allow a return to the Yanukovych era.
That same evening, people gather in the square near the Franco Theater. They chose the location so they could be seen from Bankova Street. Lviv, Odessa, and Dnipro also joined the protest.
It's important not to stay silent now, because in our country, the people are the power. I feel like we just need to shout about everything, and that's why I'm here.
Everyone has one clear demand, the president's veto on the law.
No corruption in the government. No corruption in the government.
By evening, the president signs the law, and it's immediately published in the newspaper Holos Ukraini. That means the law came into force on the day it was passed. Wednesday. Protests in Ukraine make headlines in the world press. European politicians voice concerns about the content of the law. The deputies who voted for it remain silent. The prosecutor general and the head of the security service of Ukraine are the ones commenting on everything.
NABU, SAP, and other law enforcement agencies will continue their work as they have been.
Still, no one is listening to what happens with the repeal of the law. So people are taking to the streets again.
He is not fighting for our government to seize power. My husband is fighting for us to live in a democratic and free country.
On the second day, protests are held in 24 major cities across Ukraine. Everywhere, just like in the square in Kiev, it's loud and peaceful.
Ukraine, above all.
Amid the constant chanting, familiar Ukrainian psalms ring out.
I am surging. We will raise the red vibrato.
The trumpeta is a musical instrument that gave a certain signal. We are sending a certain signal so that we are finally heard.
These gatherings are starting to be called a cardboard revolution.
I am a citizen of a sovereign state, with the feeling that I was just laughed at.
That's what I wanted to write, but I shouldn't have.
There are so many posters that people joke on social media. The rally was ordered by box manufacturers or creative agencies.
Don't throw away the cardboard. Later, we'll recycle it and buy an F-16.
The stars of the rally are the animals. Some of the dogs have signs saying, "I'm here to bark," or just sit silently with a sign that says "Uncle."
After all, they're citizens of our country too.
The police count up to 10,000 people at the protest in the capital alone.
I once brought my son to a rally and realized he's already 15 years old.
Yesterday, I kept sending him information. He says, "Mom, why are you sending me all this? I'm already here."
In the crowds, you can spot guys in balaclavas. But they insist they wear them just for their own peace of mind.
Yeah, just in case.
You're not planning any blockades?
Not at all.
On Wednesday evening, the president records an address in which he promises a new law.
I will propose to the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine a bill that will be a response, that will strengthen the law enforcement system. We'll see. It's too early to say anything until we see the text. These are just words.
We are currently waiting for some action.
Thursday.
We as a people must stand up and act, because according to the Constitution of Ukraine, it is the people who decide the fate of Ukraine.
On the third day, there are noticeably fewer people. However, the signs are getting even more creative. Water distribution points and separate children's areas are appearing.
Glory to Ukraine.
People are unfolding a large flag.
Every evening we used to unfold it in 2013 and 2014 until Maidan's victory.
And they say they'll keep coming to the rally until NABU and SAP's independence is restored.
And it seems like they want to do something again without consulting society and the people.
Mariana Bazilla appears in the crowd. The member of parliament is known for her scandalous statements and voted for the law. But she does not comment on it. Bazilla is holding a tablet in her hands.
Shame. Shame. Shame.
The deputies voted at the entrance session. The president signed the paper very quickly. The newspaper was released very quickly, not even the next day. Everything was violated.
On Thursday evening, the promised bill from the president is registered in the Verkhovna Rada. Friday. NABU and public organizations state the new bill really restores all the powers of the anti-corruption bodies. It is to be considered as urgent next Thursday, July 31st. Alina Hushchik, Ivan Pavlovich, TSN 1+1, United News Marathon.
The Verkhovna Rada will consider the presidential bill on anti-corruption bodies on July 31st. Speaker Ruslan Stefanchuk announced this on social media and added that he will propose to adopt the document both in the first reading and as a whole, as well as to support its immediate signing. The bill, which restores the independence of NABU and SAPO, was submitted to Parliament by the president last night. Zelensky claims that he discussed it with international partners, law enforcement officials, and representatives of NABU and SAPO. In particular, it includes the provision for anti-corruption officials themselves to undergo polygraph tests to prevent any Russian interference in their work. And later, in a conversation with journalists, the president expressed confidence that the deputies would support the document. He also admitted that it was necessary to start a dialogue about the controversial law, which so stirred up the public and led to mass protests. He explained that he is very focused on the war, which, I quote, remains the #1 issue for Ukraine. Have the attitudes of Ukrainians changed after the president's draft law on anti-corruption bodies was registered in Parliament? We will find out live from TSN correspondent Alina Hashchuk. She is currently working in the center of the capital, near the Ivan Franko Theater. That's where people have been gathering since Tuesday to protest against the law. So, Alina, tell us about the mood. What's happening around you? The floor is yours. Hello, Salomia.
I wanted to say that today the square near the Ivan Franko Theater is much calmer. But as you can hear, behind me people are singing Ukrainian songs, making noise, and chanting slogans that, frankly, I hadn't heard in previous days. There are fewer people today, many times fewer than in previous days. By my estimate, well, about 1,000 up to 1,000, maybe a little over 1,000, because more people are still arriving. We'll know the exact number later, but it's definitely several times fewer. Because, as you can see, I'm standing here now in the square where yesterday it was impossible to squeeze through the crowd. As for the posters, there are fewer of them today, and the main demand of the rescuers for the independence of Nabu and SAP has disappeared from their list of demands. Of course, it's still being mentioned, but they say they're now watching the actions being taken by the president and the deputies. And as for what they're chanting in the background, it's that they're demanding the return of live broadcasts from the sessions of the Verkhovna Rada so they can follow the bills being voted on in real time. They're also demanding that the deputies return to work and vote on the law. I also know that the rally was held today in other major cities of Ukraine, including Lviv. There, too, near the Taras Shevchenko monument, where rallies were held the day before as well, there were fewer people. Now it's about 100 people, not thousands like it was a few days ago. Cars are still driving by, honking and showing support for Ukrainians. A rally was also held in Odessa and Dnipro. We know that the rally in Zaporizhzhia began with a moment of silence, and about 50 people there sang the national anthem. And in Odessa, young people once again gathered on Derevasivska Street. In Dnipro, young people also came out to the Alley of Glory, and more are still joining today. Here, we can see that they're singing the anthem right now. As for the organization, they say that a big rally is planned for July 30th. This is right on the eve of the vote for the new bill that President Zelensky submitted to the Verkhovna Rada. And in the coming days, the students who are organizing these events say they will continue to support the protesters who are determined to keep coming here, to Ivan Franko Square, near Ivan Franko. So that's the situation, Salomia. We will keep celebrating and reporting on what happens next.
Thank you, Alina. TSN correspondent Alina Hashchuk was just with us live from the square in front of the Ivan Franko Theater and told us about what's happening there today. Protests are ongoing there, and we are waiting to see how the mood develops. In particular, what is happening there right now, we saw live. The United States has approved the sale to Ukraine of a package for the maintenance of air defense systems worth $180 million. The website of the Defense Security Cooperation Agency states that the supply list includes spare parts, repair equipment, consumables, and personnel training. In addition, the State Department has approved a possible sale to Ukraine of M109 self-propelled howitzers, maintenance and repair equipment, as well as related equipment worth about $150 million. And also, in another package, there will be Hawk air defense systems and Bradley infantry fighting vehicles. It is not known who will pay for these packages, but the American side emphasizes in its statements that this sale aligns with the strategic interests of the United States. The U.S. State Department commented on the recent negotiations between Ukrainian and Russian delegations in Istanbul. President Donald Trump expects that the parties will continue direct negotiations, which will lead to a complete and unconditional ceasefire, as Ukraine insists. Public protests in Ukraine against the dismantling of the independence of the anti-corruption agencies NABU and SAP are not being commented on at the government level in the United States. However, some members of Congress have made statements. And we'll be discussing all of this with TSN's own correspondent in the U.S., Ol Kashelenko. She is joining us live from Washington. Alia, hello. So let's go one by one. The State Department has commented on the third round in Istanbul. Do they really see progress in these negotiations, especially against the backdrop of ongoing Russian air attacks on us? Hello, Solya.
The deputy spokesperson of the State Department, when asked a similar question, was very reserved and basically read from the notes he already had a prepared text and didn't take the bait when they tried to get him to give a more detailed answer. His main point was that the United States welcomes direct dialogue, direct negotiations between the parties. And that's exactly what President Donald Trump wants. And, in his opinion, in the future this should lead to a complete ceasefire. As we can see, so far it hasn't. And that's something journalists here are pointing out. But at the state level, they basically aren't commenting. Let me remind you that Trump gave Russia another conditional deadline of 50 days for it, Russia to agree to a ceasefire. So when a question was raised about this to the deputy spokesperson for the Secretary of State, whether the Russians had already contacted Washington in any way about this, and whether they were holding any talks regarding this deadline, the deputy spokesperson basically said that he had no answer to that question. Let's listen.
We know that a third round of direct negotiations is taking place between the two sides. We continue to support ongoing calls for a complete and unconditional ceasefire. Ukraine's ongoing calls for a complete and unconditional ceasefire, including a total halt to all strikes on civilian and critical infrastructure. And we welcome the news that Russia and Ukraine have agreed on a further exchange of prisoners, including those who are seriously ill and wounded.
However, when it comes to deadlines, President Trump has already had quite a few. He has more than once given a conditional 2 weeks or something like that for, as he says, something to happen. But there hasn't been such a long deadline, almost 2 months, before. Let me remind you that this deadline, his latest deadline for Russia, will expire at the beginning of September. Alya,
I also have to ask, why isn't the State Department or any other U.S. government institution responding to the protests in Ukraine, which are caused, among other things, by the rollback of the independence of anti-corruption institutions? What can you say about this?
Indeed, Alya, there haven't been any comments from government institutions on this matter. It's unclear why they're waiting or perhaps expecting this process to be completed and the laws to be repealed. Or maybe they're just too preoccupied with their own domestic agenda right now. But in fact, there haven't been any statements from government institutions so far. Although Ukrainian corruption, this topic, well, it basically always comes up whenever someone here wants to argue against helping Ukraine. They always bring up Ukrainian corruption. This topic comes up every time, and it remains relevant. Let me remind you that the creation of these anti-corruption bodies, NABU and SAP, was at the time supported specifically by the United States. In other words, these are, among other things, their projects as well. But still, at the level of congressmen and senators, there was a certain reaction, and first of all, there was a statement from Congresswoman Jean Shaheen and Senator Lindsey Graham. These are very well-known supporters of Ukraine, politicians who are deeply interested in our domestic agenda. They have visited Ukraine more than once during the full-scale war and are well aware of our entire context. They released a statement, and I would say that the tone of their statement was rather restrained, but nevertheless, they stated that the law signed by Zelensky undermines the independence of anti-corruption bodies and called to refrain from this. And I suggest you listen to a quote from their statement right now.
We are concerned that the recent adoption of the law by the Verkhovna Rada, signed by President Zelensky, undermines a significant part of this progress and contradicts the tremendous fighting spirit of Ukraine, as well as the expectations of Ukrainian citizens and the international community. One of the most common arguments for ending support for Ukraine is that it has been riddled with corruption. We acknowledge that Ukraine continues to make progress in this area and urge the government to refrain from any actions that undermine this progress.
And another well-known figure, Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is known for her opposition to any aid to Ukraine, also didn't miss the chance to comment on these protest actions in Kyiv. And on her X page, she interpreted them as protests personally against Zelensky and called on Ukrainians, I quote, to throw Zelensky out of office. She portrayed it as if Ukrainians are protesting because Zelensky doesn't want to end the war and is resisting making peace agreements. Well, fortunately, even within the MAGA wing, this idea didn't catch on. Salia.
Thank you, Alia. TSN's special correspondent in the USA, Olga Koshelenko, was just with us live. She told us what was said about Ukraine this week, both about the third meeting between the Russian and Ukrainian delegations in Istanbul and about the protests in Ukraine.